Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session focuses on good and bad English. I hope by the end of this session you would have an understanding of the concept of good and bad English, particularly from the sociolinguistic perspective. Well, my dear students, one way of thinking about what English is to ask speakers of the language and to evaluate their attitude towards English. Because we may say that a language is what the speakers or the users of that language think that it is. Well, research shows that speakers often don't think about languages in their dictionary sense of the word, that this word means this, so this is how this language is. They rather prefer to categorize varieties of English as either good or bad. Now, what I'm talking about is, if we ask lay persons, if we ask lay people, common people, about what is their idea of English language, or what is their comment about a particular kind of English language. So they would not say, okay, this is a Pakistani English variety, or this is Indian English, or this is Australian English, or this is American English, or for that matter, this is the British English. Rather, they would categorize it simply as, the notions they would have would be of, this is good English, this is bad English. Such language attitudes have a lot to do with the folk beliefs that are attached with language. It is not only simply the issue about varieties of language, but also about speakers of those varieties. By saying this is good English and by saying this is bad English, what actually is being determined is not only about that language as being good or the other language as being bad, or that other variety as being bad, but also, considering that group of people who speaks this particular variety of language or the other variety of English, considering them, categorizing them as good or as bad. This issue of language in general and this issue of English language in particular, when we are talking about it, of being good and of being bad, has a lot to do with language ideology. Language ideology is a set of beliefs that people have. It is a set of norms. It is a set of attitudes that people have towards a particular language, by the way. Well, my dear students, I'm going to quote something for you, and this is from BBC radio and television presenter John Humphrey, who in 2004 asserted, I don't like glottal stops. I don't like glottal stops, especially when they are adopted by public school educated politicians because they think it makes them sound cool. And I don't like people saying think unless, instead of think, unless they have a speech impediment. So, these kind of comments, where somebody would say, I like this about a particular pronunciation, I dislike this about a particular pronunciation. I like this about a particular structure, syntax in a particular variety. I dislike this in a particular structure or variety of English. This reflects attitude of people not only towards English language, I would say, but also, the users of these different varieties of English language. The justification for the writer's dislike in this case of the glottal stop has less to do with the sound itself than with the particular set of speakers who use it for a particular function. So, it is not simply a matter of liking something in language or disliking something in language. It is about showing a particular kind of attitude towards the set A of the users of that particular language or set B of the users of another variety of that language. I'm here quoting another example. I dislike London accent because they are stuck-up snobs. I think this makes it clear now. Liking a particular accent or disliking a particular accent of English is not because this London accent in this particular case is not because of the accent itself as per se. It is because of the attitude that this speaker or the writer thinks about, as being displayed by the speakers of this variety, as snobs. Well, my dear students, Edwards 1982 points out people's reactions to language varieties reveal much of their perceptions of the speakers of these varieties. It's not about our perception of a variety, it's about our perception of about the speakers of that variety as well. Associated with this notion of good and bad forms of English is the doctrine of correctness as well. This idea of good English or bad English leads towards the idea of correct English and incorrect English. So a particular variety of English, for example, an Indian variety or a Pakistani variety, may be considered to be an incorrect variety, for example, by an American or, for example, by a British native speaker of English, on the basis that the pronunciation, for example, is different, or, for example, the stress and stress patterns, the intonation, that is the totality of the tone, is different. However, such errors have included grammatical features apart from pronunciation, etc. For example, multiple negations, for example, I ain't never been there, or for example, the use of added in, when you say somebody received an added bonus from somewhere. Bonus is already something that is, by the way, added thing. So, there are people who would say this is bad language. These are not the standardized, these are not the formal structures of language, whereas there can be different attitudes. So there might be people who would think of them as okay, they would think of them as being fine. So, with the notion of good or bad English, another notion that is related is of standard English. And, this idea of standard English, the variety which is considered to be, the socially, and in most of the cases, in the cases of states, approved as the state-approved policy language, that standard variety is considered to be the right or the good English, and the other varieties are considered to be bad English varieties. If you look at this example, for example, the thieves broke into our kitchen, but they only took the toaster. Compare this with this one, where the thieves broke into our kitchen and they took only the toaster. Now, there would be different people. There can be a person who would say that the first sentence has a completely different meaning from the second meaning, where, the positioning of only and took is changed. In the first case, they only could manage to take that. In the second case, they took only one thing, that is, this toaster. But, these kind of levels of expectations in terms of correctness of standards in syntax, they are challenged in today's world because we need to think of the global varieties of English. Today's world, where the ownership of English language is jointly owned by a lot of population of the world with multiple ethnicities and nationalities and identities. In this case, the issue of settling a particular variety as good English or as bad English is not that simple a case.